All right, let's get into the book of Revelation, chapter 12. This is kind of a good chapter in the sense that if Revelation from the book of Genesis to now has not been clear to you, hopefully this clears things up, because it's going to take you backwards to take you forwards. It's a book about clarity. It's going to use symbolism. It's going to use signs. It's going to use some things that should jog your memory from the Old Testament and help bring clarity to what is actually happening and why. And we're going to get revelation, I believe, of the nation of Israel. We're going to get revelation of Christ. We're going to get revelation of who the devil is, who his demons are. All of that comes clear in this passage. So there's a lot packed in, 18 verses in all, but boy, there's a lot in these 18 verses, and we're going to look at them and study them tonight. So, Pastor Matt, would you greet us?
We were talking about electric before everything started, and one thing I love and hate about electric is sometimes the lights work, sometimes it doesn't. And it's amazing. The wires could be so close together that it's called an arc. You know, electricity arcs and stuff, and it kind of jumps from one wire to the other. It'll work and not work, work and not work. You know, wires can get so close and still there's no light or no power. If we get all in and connect to it, that's when the light and the power starts. So don't just get close to the Word. Don't just get close to the church. Don't just get close to theology. Don't just get close to a relationship. Get all in and really receive the power.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah, and you know, Pastor Matt, I don't know about you, but I think if you read this Bible from cover to cover, there's some confusing things, no doubt. There's big question marks that I put in my Bible for years until the Lord reveals it to me, and then I get to erase it, right? There's some confusing lingo and confusing pictures and confusing, am I supposed to take this literally, or is this a metaphor? Is this symbolic? What's really going on here? And then the kindness of God to take a chapter 12 and say, I just want it to be crystal clear. Mm-hmm. I want it to be crystal clear. And one of the things about the revelation of Christ that we're going to learn tonight in this chapter that I think God took the time to make as crystal clear as possible, the devil is not nearly the opponent of God that he thinks he is. Right. And he will be dealt with as an underling tonight in this chapter. You are going to see that loud and clear. So if somehow you think good versus evil is God versus the devil, you're wrong. God always sends an underling to deal with him.
People tend to look at it like that Asian symbol, the yin yang.
Right.
That it's two equal forces, and it's not.
Yeah, it's not. Evil doesn't stand a chance. When God shows up, it's light, it's power, it's everything that we know that is pure goodness. And evil can't even be in the vicinity to yin and yang, opposite it. So, chapter 12, let's get into it, shall we? Important to this, there's going to be an introduction, symbolic introduction of a woman. We have to know who the woman is to understand the rest of the passage. So this has got to be crystal clear, and I believe it becomes crystal clear for us. Now a great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. All right, so again, John the Revelator, he's receiving a vision while being in the presence of God. All right, we got that? This all of a sudden happens, a word picture happens for him. And this is what it looks like. A woman clothed in all of this. She's pregnant and she gives birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. He drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So if you thought I said it was going to be clear, and then I read that, and you're like, your definition of clarity and mine are very different. But we're going to get into this because these are signs or symbols that have connection to the Old Testament. And once you know what the symbols are, then it becomes clear. Are we making sense? So Pastor Matt, jump in there.
And these signs and symbols, this is the most frustrating thing. Like, as a believer, I watch people now. Again, not that we're anti-signs. Don't do the wrong thing. But people worship signs.
Sure they do.
They take a rainbow and they worship it. They take a whatever sign it is, and they worship the sign as opposed to the person that the sign points to.
I'll give you, for instance, in the Bible, Moses told them to take a pole, wrap a snake, and whoever looked at it would live if they were bitten by the snakes, right? You read later that they made a god out of it, called it a Nehushtan, and worshipped something that was supposed to just be a temporary solution and a sign that pointed to Christ. And they end up giving it a name and worshiping it and trying to carry it into battle as our victory sword. And God was ticked. Like, what are you doing? But that's
the
a
Crusades
purpose.
were big on that when they would go over and fight Islam. But one of the big things of the Crusades was to gather artifacts, biblical artifacts, to bring them back. And sometimes if they couldn't find them, they'd make them up.
Sure.
Because they so wouldn't come back empty-handed. And
Sure.
in the Shroud of Turin, here's another thing that people like worship.
Yeah, you worship it.
Yeah.
It's like, look, it was just a thing.
Yeah.
It was part of the story. It's not the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So I didn't mean to steal
you're
your
good.
thunder there. But
Just the whole point is signs turn to something.
Present with us. Oh my God, that'd be a whole other religion.
Yeah.
There.
yeah, the archist or whatever.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So that's the whole point. What you're going to see here is that all these signs, no matter what the sign is, like a stop sign is a sign, but that's not like the deal. The deal is you stop before the road. The sign points to the road. The rainbow isn't the deal. It's cool. It's neat. The rainbow points to what? To the promise, the covenant, right? That's what it points to. It's not about a rainbow, no matter who tries to steal it. It's a reminder of what the covenant is. Signs point to something. Don't worship the sign. Worship what it focus what it's pointing to. Like I just had a question not too long ago. Someone asked me about crystals. God makes crystals. Shouldn't we use crystals because you can use them and get one with the earth? And I'm like,
What?
huh? Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but again, going to the sign issue, you're worshiping the sign. Worship the God that made the sign. You don't need a crystal to get close to God. Get close to God. Here, do this. All right, now start reading. That's how we get close to God. Like, it's not hard.
So many scholars try to wonder and pinpoint who the woman is, but you have to have a Jewish understanding, which John is Jewish, and he has a biblical heritage, upbringing of the covenant, the Old Testament. This is hard for us to get our brains around, but many 12-year-old boys would have already memorized the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Can you believe that? I mean, and that was a sign of your manhood at 12 years old. I'm ready. I'm a man. I'm ready. I know the Word of God. That takes a lot of training. When you get up in the morning, as you go through your day, as you go to bed at night, someone better be rehearsing the Scriptures with you. And so, back tucked into the narrative of Scripture in Genesis chapter 37, we meet a dreamer by the name of Joseph. And Joseph has a dream of his future and his family. I wonder what the picture is that God gave him in the dream. Let's read it. It's in Genesis 37, verses 9 through 11. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I've dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me. And he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him, saying, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth to you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept this matter in his mind. If you know how the story of Joseph plays out, his brothers do end up bowing down to him. And his father and mother become part of a bigger story called the birth of a nation. Because all of his brothers and he become the tribe heads of the nation of Israel. So if I have that word picture that God introduced in a dream that says, this is the birth of a nation, son, and you're at the center of it. And then I turn to Revelation and the same picture is there. Who is the woman?
Israel.
It's got to be, right? The birth of a nation connects with the same symbolism, and I don't think John has to say, I know who she is. He inherently knows, I know this word picture. I've seen this before. Is that what you're getting out of it?
Yeah, you'll see three main points as far as who this woman is. You see it has to be Mary. It has to be the church. The church is it. But I personally believe everything I've read, it's Israel, and that's what everything points to. It's what it shows.
Yeah, the other one would be replacement theology, which
Yeah.
is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right, Israel is put on display in this passage in several places because there is a national interest in mind. I believe the nation of Israel is to steal the word from Joel Rosenberg, it's the epicenter of the world.
That's right.
Whatever happens in Israel is the barometer for what goes on in the world.
That's right.
And so is prophecy. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, when Israel is hated by all nations, it's an indicator that more is about to happen.
That's right.
And so, whenever you see things happening in the news where Israel is hated by another nation or bombed by a nation or whatever, that should set off biblical things in your mind. A couple of administrations ago, we were told that we were no longer going to be allies of the nation of Israel. I said, speed up prophecy. The next administration said, oh no, we're going to keep this alliance. And so far, this current administration is keeping the alliance. So we're not there yet, we know that. But it is an epicenter. It is a topic of discussion. Whatever happens to the nation of Israel clearly starts to set off things that happened in the prophetic sense.
Yeah.
So we need to see the chapter 12 in that light, that Israel is the epicenter. It's not just a nation on earth. It is God's chosen people. It is the nation that delivered to us the Christ. Right? And that's clearly what's being represented in verse 2. This woman brought forth a child. Some readers might say, so what? A weirdly dressed woman brought forth a child. Is this what we're reading? Is just some weird archaic story? Or is this a word picture to tell us about the Christ? I believe it's a story about Christ. What do you think there?
Absolutely, 100%.
So, then being with child, verse 2, she cried out in labor and pain to give birth. And then another sign appeared. Who is there to stop Christ? All right. Who knows the biblical narrative of the Christmas story well enough to tell me who Satan tried to use to stop the arrival of Christ? King Herod. What did King Herod put into place? Kill all the babies born in and around this time period, because I estimate him to be around 2 years old. So Joseph, his not biological father, but earthly father representative, has a dream. Take your son to Egypt. There's going to be a slaying like you've never known before. Right? And so you can't help but look at the passage and say, I know this story. John is privy to the information. He lived with Christ. He walked with Christ. And I'm sure he got the backstory because John was one of the first people to ask, show me where you live. Take me to your house. That's got to be a cool invitation. Come and see, he says. And he gets to go see where Jesus lives. So it's this cool concept that here comes the next sign. There's 2 signs given, the woman, and now another sign appeared in heaven. Now, if you think the devil is a dragon, you're reading the passage wrong.
Even though that makes a really neat nativity scene. So I actually had a couple pictures I was going to put together as a nativity scene, and the next picture was like a dragon on top of it. So that's what I'm talking about. That's a realistic view, because he is. That's if you can kind of grab a hold of what spiritual warfare looks like, this is a picture perfect view of spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
So you have the birth of a baby, and what is the dragon doing? Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Why is he trying to attack the baby Jesus? That's easy pickings.
Yeah.
Why do you think new believers are they come and go so much? Because you guys are easy. We're easy pickings when we're babies. Mm-hmm. We need mom and dad to protect us. We don't know any better. Don't put that in your mouth. Don't stick that in the light socket. Don't touch the stove, right? That's our job as parents. And he protects us. Hey, leave the area, because like everybody around here is going to be killed if you're 2 and younger. We need dad and mom to protect us, right? But the dragon comes, the Satan comes to come and kill, steal, and destroy. And he's not looking for a difficult fight. In the illustration, actually, I won't tell the illustration. I'll let you do it. Pastor Kevin gave a really good illustration. I think it was yesterday or day before at work when he talked about competition, and it was, I believe, the show Survivor. Okay, it was a competition that at the very end this person wanted to win. So having said that, this is not what the devil does. So go ahead and share that story.
So I don't know if there's any Survivor fans in here, but I don't know. Maybe I'm hooked, addicted. I'll even watch reruns of seasons that I already know who's going to win. But there's something about how the game is played. It's all strategy from day one. It's an island where all of these players are trying to win $1 million, right? And the one that I was watching, it came down to the final 3. One of them had won immunity. That meant he could not be voted off at tribal council. If this is weird language to you, I'm sorry. But he could not be voted off at tribal council because he won immunity. That meant that there were 2 people left to vote. We all know they're going to vote each other. And that will cancel out their vote, and that would leave one winner. But that's not how Survivor works. Survivor means the one with immunity gets to choose who leaves the island, right? And so everybody, every viewer that was watching this one knew there was a man and a woman left. Everyone knew that if he chose to remove the man and go against the woman, he would win. He had the favor with everybody. But he knew this. But he said to himself, I want a worthy opponent to battle at the finals. So he elected to get rid of the easy pickings, and he went against the harder opponent. And guess what? He lost. He lost. And when they interviewed him at the big after show, why did you do that? Everyone in America was screaming at their television, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And he said, in my culture, you never take the lower battle. You always step up to take the bigger battle, and if you beat him, then you're a worthy champion. If you lose to him, you lose with honor and you go home. See, that's not how the devil fights. He's after the slim pickings, the easy pickings. He would have chosen the woman to battle with and knocked her out and said, see, I'm the champion.
Yeah.
So interesting examination of cultures, interesting examination of how we should do battle and all of these sorts of things. But it is a show about psychology. It really is. The psychology of the human being. But back to this text. Again, the dragon is a symbol that represents Who? Satan. So let's look at it again. Another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. All of these will be revealed. Every one of those symbols will be revealed to us in later chapters, so we need not camp there. It's going to become clear what each of those heads represent and what the horns and diadems represent. We'll get to that later. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman and was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. So the question is, what are we supposed to appreciate from what he just told us? There's a lot of people that say the devil has his demons. And the question is, where did he get them? This passage tells us that he drew 1/3 of the symbolic stars, angelic representatives that lived in the abode of God and served God. Lucifer also served God. Satan was not always Satan. He was a created angelic being that served God. Can you imagine that? Where do we get this information in the Bible? It comes actually from the book of Isaiah. Isaiah 14:12. It says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit." His ideal was to usurp the authority of God and to overtake the throne of God. And we're told right here in this passage, no, God is about to slam you down to Sheol, to the grave, to the lowest depths of the pit. Now, I have to tell you right now that although Satan has his roaming on the earth, we know that he's not, like, the devil doesn't live in hell. You all know that, right?
Right.
He roams to and fro about the earth, seeking whom he may devour, right? The book of Job also reveals that he reports in the presence of God. I mean, this is just phenomenal stuff, which means he has access to God. It's mind-boggling, mind-numbing that he can be in heaven and I can't be there yet. Like, what? Right, he's the accuser. We're going to read that in just a moment. But we have to appreciate in this moment the revelation of what we're receiving is that he was cast out just as it was prophesied. He took 1/3 of the angels with him. And we don't know what 1/3 of the angelic race is. It's huge. But we do know he has 1/3 of them. And they work with him. They serve him in some capacity, doing his bidding, doing his warring, doing his evils. And Revelation makes the Isaiah picture clearer. Lucifer was cast out. How did he get his demons? We don't even learn until the last book of the Bible. Oh, he's got a team. He's not doing all of this work by himself. He's got a team of people, and we're told right there in Revelation that 1/3 of the angelic beings are with him in this dramatic casting out. And they all stand there ready to devour the child, as Pastor Matt was displaying in the nativity scene. It should be a normal, put the dragon up there now, kiddo.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dragon's at the nativity. He's waiting for the birth of the child. No wonder there wasn't a royal hotel. No wonder there wasn't the splendid conditions. It's all happening in a manger, in a barn. God says, I know exactly what I'm doing. This dragon is waiting for the arrival of Christ. I'm not going to make a real big deal about this. In a barn, in a stable, in a manger. Here comes my solution. Isn't it awe-inspiring? Pastor Matt, anything there?
Before we read verse number 5, just pay attention, because if you want to grab the whole gospel of Christ in one verse, it's verse 5.
Yeah, it's fast forward, right?
It's the whole thing. She bore a male child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. Okay, so you kind of get that, right? That's a powerful verse. Just think about how many verses, the Gospels, Acts, all these verses in that one verse. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. That's the gospel of Christ in one verse. So here we are. We're at a male child is going to rule. And again, I think this is why it was so disappointing for the believers at that time, all the disciples and apostles, when they knew they were going in Jerusalem. If you remember a few weeks ago, the whole blah, 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 blah series, not series, but the teaching is Jesus says, we're going to Jerusalem. And they're thinking, here he is. He's going to become the king. And their expectations were through the roof. And then we get to this. He's going to rule with a rod of iron. But there's still got to be a crucifixion. There still has to be blood. There still has to be forgiveness. There still has to be a resurrection. All that has to take place. Now he's ready to rule. And you'll see in a few verses, you'll see the desperation of the dragon, if you will, because he knows his time is coming.
Yeah, exactly. Even the ascension from Acts, he ascended before, and he's at the right hand of the Father. It's all capsulated in verse 5. And then we go on to verse 6. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So all of a sudden we're back to a picture of Israel being driven out of its own nation and going to find shelter for a period of 3.5 years. In Matthew 24, we are told that when the abomination that causes desolation is revealed, get out. Right? Get out of Israel. Where would they get that idea except it's already been revealed to John in his writings that one day, guys, it's going to get so pressurized in Israel, the threat against you will be, Nazi Germany will look like child's play compared to what this guy wants to do to that nation. And they will have to leave Israel proper to save their lives. And we're told here by God, he sees it, he knows it, it's all coming. Jesus prophesied it. The revelation of Christ in this passage is, it's gonna come to pass, guys. This demonic, evil, devil creature known as the Antichrist is going to do something so horrific that they're gonna have to flee and get into the wilderness where God has already prepared a safe place for them. It harkens back. We're talking about a cyclical God. He loves circles. We've seen this story before. We've seen it with the nation of Israel leaving Egyptian bondage and going where? Into the wilderness. Does anyone know what Moses told Pharaoh they were going out there to do? They were going out there to worship God and do their sacrifices to God. And that's why they needed their animals. That's why they needed all the people. The men just couldn't go. Their families needed to go. Everybody needed to go. We're going out to worship God. What did they end up doing? Wandering and wandering and wandering around because they really didn't learn how to worship out there. Isn't it a weird phenomenon? That you can go out with the best intentions, but if you don't fulfill it, you end up wandering. You got to fulfill the reason for why you're there, and then you keep moving forward. That's just a little preacher's jag there, but anyway, he's out there in the Israel is going to be told, you've got to get out of your nation. Now that's hard to do. Imagine every American with American patriotism being told, listen, You've got to get out of your house. The guy in charge is not friendly towards you. We've got to shut this down. Eminent domain is everywhere. The government is taking over. If you want to live, you either have to bow down to this leader or you got to get out. And by the way, he hates your kind. What do? Do you stay down and hunker down and get as much ammo as you can, or do you leave? And Jesus, it's amazing. God says throughout Scripture, just leave. It's not as important as you think. I have streets of gold. I have a royal city whose foundations and maker are God, whose beautiful foundations are precious stones. It's an amazing city that will come down. God's abode will be with man, and it is far better than your house. You'll want to live there. And he's saying, don't hang on to this. Hang on to this. This is temporary. That's eternal. Are we making sense? And so all of this word picture is coming to us so we can translate the Old Testament and some of the New Testament gospel narrative and tuck it neatly into end time theology and say this all makes sense. It all makes its final end here in the Scriptures. Pastor Matt, anything about that?
No, good.
All right, so
7.
Yeah, but the 3.5 years.
You got it.
I believe we're in the second half. I believe we're in the wrath of God. Right? We're not in the first part of the peaceful Antichrist. We're in the second half now. The wrath of God is being poured out, and it has to do with Satan actually being cast out, no longer allowed in the presence of God. We're going to see that in this passage here shortly.
And what do you mean by that? Because the whole Job story where Satan goes to and fro, that's like still happening.
Yeah, it's currently happening.
This is the last time he's ever steps foot in there, ever.
So, and we're told that, and it's going to be a big deal. So the wrath of God is about to be poured out through the next event. And war broke out in the heavens. I love this part. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail. My friend that wrote on this, I love his sense of humor. He imagines that Lucifer used to be Michael's boss in the angelic realm. And now Lucifer has lost his position, and who does he send but the next in charge? God doesn't come down and fight him. I love that imagination there. I don't know if it's factual, but it sure is fun to think about. Oh, you wanted to be in charge over God. You lost your job and you've been thrown to the earthly domain, and now you want to fight against God. I think I'll send your underling to take care of you. Isn't that just God's way? Yeah. Is that how you see it?
Oh yeah. So I actually have a note here that like notice who's fighting here. I don't know. I don't know. This is if I were God, I'd be like, oh no, I got this. You know what I mean? Right. But it's like, again, this is going to be the easiest battle. I know Hollywood, the Battle of Armageddon, when you read all these hero movies, these mortals are coming together and they're fighting against gods and they're winning. No. This is going to be an easy battle. Armageddon, the Battle of Armageddon is going to be an easy battle. This right here would have been an easy battle for God. He sends Michael and they battle, but there's no competition. Remember, 1/3 against 2/3.
You lose.
Yeah, you lose. And we got a God-fearing, and this is why like a lot of people will ask the question, why go through all of this? Why the Bible? Why did Jesus have to die? Why couldn't he just create us and have us worship him? It's like, well, he did that. The angels fell. This will be the first time in history ever, every single angel, being, spirit, anything. It'll be the first time ever everybody in heaven chose to be there.
Yeah, they want to be there. Exactly.
It'll be the first time.
That's a big statement.
It is.
And that also helps create our theology. If someone is in hell, they actually want to be there.
You chose it.
They don't want what God has to offer. I don't think they understand the ramifications of it. Clearly, if they did, they would choose God, but they choose otherwise.
And that's why you see grace after grace after grace after grace, even though it's judgmental grace. At the end of it, guys, this is real. That's why I personally, it doesn't say it's the largest revival in the history of man. I believe it's the largest revival in the history of man. Is during Revelation, after the rapture. I believe God is going to be moving and lives are going to be changed. If you look at the percentage of Christians in the world, it's not a lot. I believe it's a huge, worldwide, largest revival in the history of man. We haven't even seen it yet. And it's not even being led by Christians. It's by the Jews.
Right.
Right. That's right.
Marked for this occasion.
That's right.
144,000 marked for this occasion. The next line of verse 8 says, "Nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer."
Yeah.
I love that line because it says that they did have access to God, but in this moment, that access to God has been cut off. Now, even the devil knows a good place when he's in it. But when you've been thrown out and you have access to heaven no longer, how ticked off are you? I mean, I'm ticked off when they tell me on vacation of the last day you have to check out at 11. I'm here all day.
Yeah.
I want to go back to my room. I want to shower. What do you mean? 11. Let's make it 9.
Right, at night.
After sunset.
Yeah.
Like, who made this 11 out checkout time? I get ticked about that. And that's just a condo or a home or a hotel, whatever. But being thrown out of the presence of God is going to create a hatred. Where do you think his hatred will be directed?
The woman. Israel.
The woman, Israel. Because he already tried to fight a heavenly battle and lost. When you lose the biggest battle of your life, where do you go next? I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to take out... I tried to take out the nation before it was even born. I couldn't do it. I tried to take out the leader, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I was unsuccessful at that. Let me see if I can somehow ruin the church. I think because of the teaching of Revelation and the letters to the churches, God warns us enough so that we're not bombarded by evil and we know how to fix it. And he's unsuccessful, and he's unsuccessful on every level. Again, he tries to fight the angelic realm. He's unsuccessful, and he turns his sight on Israel. And I think we're going to find he's unsuccessful yet again. I don't know where his morale is at this point, but I don't think the devil's ever had a good day in his life. Verse 9. So the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, called the devil and Satan. Why are we told his name? Do you think it has any importance whatsoever? I think it does. We'll get to it in just a minute.
And you'll see 4 different descriptions, if you pay attention to this one verse, 4 different descriptions of the dragon.
So it's the great dragon cast out, the serpent of old. Where do we see the serpent?
Genesis, yeah.
Genesis, right? So he's called a great dragon. That's the symbolic image. The serpent of old, called the devil and Satan. Diablos is destroyer. Satan is the accuser. These are who he is. His name is who he is. He's that and so much more wicked. Who deceives the whole world, and he's cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. I think that we've described dark neighborhoods, and we know when we're in it. The hair on our neck stands up. You get this sense this neighborhood isn't good. There's some symbols for us. Bars on the convenience stores. I mean, that's a huge indicator. You come into that stop sign and you're like, I'm in the wrong neighborhood. I can tell. So there's certain people hanging around the corner. They're staring at your car, wondering why you're in this neighborhood. I mean, there's a lot of indicators you're in the wrong neighborhood. At this point, you're in the wrong space. You're in the wrong planet. You're in the wrong atmosphere. It is totally diabolical and hate-filled because they're not going back and forth. Their domain, their region is entirely earthly at this point in time. I don't want to be here for this. You don't want to be here for this. Nobody wants to be here for this. But God's people are somehow going to be here for this. And that's why we're told this. What's going to happen is an interesting story. Keep going. Matt, anything there?
Yeah, so every time I see that verse, I always think of, especially the whole being cast out, all the demons, all his posse. I don't know. I don't know if he comes up there with his whole posse every time. In my understanding of who he is, I think he does. If you could picture yourself in heaven and you see the doors open up and you see Satan coming in here with his posse, and you're like, what the?
Yeah, it gives you a weird feeling.
Yeah, it's like, I wonder if it's one of those, oh, we're going to get you soon. Like, I don't know.
We would do that.
Like, if I were there, I'd be taunting the junk out of him. I read the book. You lose. Yeah, you lose.
Loser!
I see the X on the world. Like, X marks the spot, and you're going to be hitting it here in a minute. So that's what I'm seeing right here. And you see the anger, you see the frustration, and when he gets thrown down,
yeah.
Now it's like, okay, now this is all making sense now. Now, I don't know, it doesn't say, I wonder if at that moment he realizes this is happening. Like,
Yeah.
I'm losing.
Yeah.
Like, I have access to the throne room anytime I want to. I can't go there anymore. I wonder if he tried to go back. It's like, no, I don't. Oh, man, I can't get in anymore. My card doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All this stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Now he's on earth, and he's there's a desperation.
Yeah.
And we see
Without
his
a doubt.
desperation.
Yeah.
And I'm not a hunter, but I've heard guys talk about if you're going to take an animal down, you want to get it in one shot. Because if you're wounded, it becomes more dangerous than if it wasn't wounded.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what do we see here? A wounded Lucifer.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. And it's torturous. And the word pictures are clearly indicating that. Did we get all the descriptions of him that
Yeah,
you wanted?
we're good. Yeah, you nailed everyone.
All right. So there's a response in the heavenly. I love verse 10. There's a response in the heavenly realm. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren who accused them before our God day and night has been cast down. Amen. That annoying whatever voice is gone. Can you imagine there are people in the abode of heaven right now and the devil's barking at God's ear. They don't deserve to be here. They did this. This person deserved to be here. They did this. And he lets him drone on. For years, he lets Satan drone on, the accuser of people that are in the presence of God. Accusing. They don't belong here. They don't belong here. They don't belong here. I mean, you can only take that voice for so long, right? Finally, it has its end, and there's a celebration. Finally, that agonizing voice that said I didn't belong here is gone. It has been, theorized whose voice could be shouting, "Hooray! Hooray! He's gone." Whose voice could it be? It could be the voice of the saints. It could be the angelic voice that has been leading this whole discussion since chapter 10, which I kind of side with. It's been narrated for John, all of this. I kind of believe it's that, but it could be a chorus of voices that he's hearing. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I kind of lean towards, I'd like to think it's the martyrs.
Sure.
Because you'll see that in chapter 6, verse number 10 of the same thing, where the martyrs start yelling and
Yeah, that's
screaming
right.
again. So I kind of lean towards that because again, he's the accuser, so I'm thinking he's walking through heaven. Oh, Dave's here? Oh, yeah, I know what you did. Oh, I can't wait to Judgment Day. Oh, I got a whole book on you. You wait. As he's leaving, you know what I mean? That's what I see him doing. And finally, he's cast out for the last time. And they're like, yes, ding dong. Which is dead. Like that's, I don't know if that's what's happening and that's why they're screaming, but I don't know, it seems like that would be accurate. I know I'd be excited about it.
The next two verses kind of lend to that idea, because it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb.
Now look, pay attention to this. Verse number 11 is spiritual warfare. You want to know how to defeat the devil? Right here, verse number 11.
By the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to death. Three things.
Yeah.
All right, so the three things are the dynamic in heaven, spiritual, nuh-uh. You say I don't belong here? Nuh-uh. I do belong here. And the devil says, oh, please, entertain me. Why do you belong here? Because the blood of Jesus is on my life. Oh, no, he knows. Oh, yeah, what else you got? I have my testimony.
Yeah.
You can't, you can warp stories, you can twist stories, but you can't steal anybody's testimony. The veracity of my belief in God is that as a 12-year-old boy, I was brought up in church, but I had a miracle happen to me, and it was asked of me in a theology class, why do you believe in God? And I gave my short little 12-year-old version of me story. We had a person in church from the continent of Africa. He was out there in the fields of Africa preaching Christ, doing miracles, signs, and wonders, as the Bible talks about. Cancers, disease, the dead were raised. This guy was out there in the wilds of Africa doing that type of ministry. He came to America to testify of the power of God because he heard of the moral decline in America. So he says, I'm seeing God move in my continent. I'd love for God to move in yours. So he was coming to America as a missionary. And that was phenomenal for me to even digest as a 12-year-old boy. But he preached a sermon, and at the end, he said, God's healing power is in this room. And I believed him. And he said, if you want God to heal you, raise your hand. And earlier that day, I had cut my finger being stupid. I'll just leave it at that. I cut my finger being a 12-year-old boy. And I lifted that finger to God. It was underneath a Band-Aid, and I felt like a zipper had zipped up the wound. And I felt like the Lord said to me, check it. So I took off the Band-Aid, and it wasn't there. The wound that I had stupidly done earlier was gone. And from that day forward, you can't take my belief in God away.
That's right.
I know the power of my own testimony, as minuscule as it is. I know that it defeats the enemy.
Yes.
Anytime there's doubt, God says, 12 years old, remember?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember. When I doubt the veracity of his word, he says, remember that service? Do you remember? Yes, sir, I remember. I don't need the second law of thermodynamics. I don't need any early earth, old earth. I don't need any of that. He touched me, and I know it.
Amen.
You see, that's power. The devil can't stand that type of power because he's oppressed underneath that type of testimony. And then the last one is that he always tempts us with is the longevity of our life. Anytime somebody gets that, you only have this long to live. Most people gasp, what? A Christian should have this ambivalent, Paul-like response. I don't care if I stay or go. Either way, I win and I get to be with God. Right? This ambivalence that we see out of Paul. But he says, I'd rather be in the presence of God. So as we see this unfolding, you estimate your life and its worth here, realizing you're dirt. And your eternal body awaits. And a mortal body awaits. Why do we want to hang on to dirt when immortality awaits us? So it's these three things that I see jumping off the page, and I think fits what Pastor Matt was saying. It's these that have been taunted, the martyrs that have been taunted, that said, my life isn't worth living on this earth if I can be with God. Go ahead and feed me to the lions. Go ahead and chop off my head. I don't care. I'll get to be with God forever and ever. So that's the taunt's answer.
The word overcame in here, it takes me back to the 7 letters. If you want to be an overcomer, well, how do you will get this. And the question
How do you
is,
overcome?
How do we overcome? Boom, right here.
By the blood of the Lamb, the word of your testimony, and you're not hanging on to the love of your life to death, right?
In the translation, it's you're not overcoming it because you have a good job. You're not overcoming it because you have a great church. You're not overcoming it because you're part of a worship team. You overcome it because of His blood.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, Titus 3:5, he says, it's not because of righteous things we have done, because of His mercy.
Yeah. Yes.
Since it's testimony time, since your finger, I'm gonna say it. When I was sick in the hospital, they set me up to go in for chemotherapy. 1 hour before I went in for the chemo, my doctor came and said, her numbers are not right, do not give her that. Because of him.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you for your story. Verse 12 quickly gives us a response to the devil has been thrown down. He's no longer in heaven. 2 things are going to happen. An elation of party in heaven.
Yeah.
And on earth. Right? Look at verse 12. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that his time is short.
That's right.
He's only got how many days? From this moment.
3.5 years.
He's got 1,260 days. Devil, do what you're going to do. You've only got 1,260 days. And go! It's like they're watching Survivor from heaven. We're watching Survivor. Who will make their way through this? It really is. It's not a game show and it's not funny, but the response is, who will make it through this? Because the devil's ticked. And it says here, the wrath. It says great wrath.
Right. Yes.
And again, we think that the devil creates wrath. He doesn't. He was thrown down by God to make wrath.
Yeah.
Again, our perspective gets off. It came from God. You're not here anymore. Do what you're supposed to do. Again, he's still being bossed around. The devil is not imaginative at all. He's got to be told what, when, and how to do what he does. Crazy. Any thoughts on that?
No, we're good.
All right. Time is short. Verse 13. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. This cannot be the Virgin Mary. Right? I mean, the story, the way that it plays out, it's like, it can't be the Virgin Mary. It's got to be the nation. It's got to be Israel. He's going to persecute the one who brought forth the male child, the Christ. But the woman was given, now think of this, the tumult, the chaos that the world's in, and he goes after one tiny little nation. What is it, 144 miles by 75 miles at its widest point. I mean, what? Why is his lusty anger after this tiny little geographical location? Because of what it represents, right? It represents everything godly. It's the antithesis of him and who he is, and it represents God on earth. I think I'll attack it. You know, Bethel is one of the cities in Israel. None other than the house of God is what Jacob called it when he laid his head down to sleep there that night on a rock. And ladders with angels ascending and descending on that spot. It represents to him, I know geographically what that is. I don't know if you want to call it a portal or what, but godliness happens there, right? And we see it. So he attacks this tiny little country. But the woman, Israel, was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, and a half a time, from the presence of the serpent. I think, I don't want to overthink this, but I think the serpent name is chosen because they're going to be tempted in the wilderness by evil. Do we know this story at all in the Bible? Because when everything that you're used to, opening a pantry and getting out your food, and now you're driven to the wilderness, you get hungry. And he uses the same old antics. Why don't you ask God to turn these stones into bread? Well, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. I mean, you understand what's happening here. Why the word serpent is chosen. He's the tempter of old. And where do they find themselves? In the wilderness. I mean, the story just, it's over and over tells itself. But right now we know Isaiah 40, he lifts us up on eagle's wings, mounts us up, and we'll fly like eagles. And then when it's time to land, he puts us in our place, and you run, and then you walk, right? Clearly the representation of how God lifts us up on eagle's wings. So the serpent has a response. He sees that Israel has fled, and so what does he do? The serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. Now, what are we looking at here? Pastor Matt, do you want to comment on this, or where do you want to go?
It's one of those things that, like, I don't know if you ever done this with animals or ants more so. I've been guilty of this with ants.
Tell us, man.
Where you take the water and just kind of like, I think that's what he does. Where it's not like a laser pointer and he's trying to hit each one. I think he just unleashes all this stuff, and it's like, all right, however you hit and wherever it hits, I don't really care. I just want to take as many people as I can out. That's what I kind of envision. I think he throws everything and anything out. Again, remember, he's a college kid right now, studying for the exam, and he's never studied before, and he's trying to get the exam right, and he's struggling. He's working extra hard and trying to do all this extra stuff, and that he's throwing everything he has out to cause all this chaos, because he sees the greatest revival in history is happening, and he's actually on the earth fighting everything he's got, and he's losing.
Yeah, I think that's the proper terminology here. I don't think we're watching an event of water flood. I think it's a flood of dissipation.
Yeah.
It's a flood of evil. It's a flood of war. It's a flood of wickedness. Whatever I can throw at Jamie, I'm going to throw at her because she's a child of God.
Yeah.
Look what it says. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. So the enemy, whatever it is trying to drown out the people of God. And the earth opens up and swallows whatever it is, whether it's water or an army or chaos, people that are fighting against God's people. The earth opens up. Does anyone remember the story of Abiram and Dathan? Yeah. They opposed Moses. Yeah. He said, whoever's with me, come over here. If you're not with me, whoo.
Stand in that little circle right
Stand
there.
over there. And the leaders of Israel ran to Moses, and a bunch of people that wanted a rebellion sided over there, and the earth opened, swallowed them up.
Alive.
And Moses said, moving on. I mean, what do? The earth helped us. Just swallow up this rebellion. I think the scriptures bear it out that this is not a flood of water, it's a flood of war. It's a flood of, we're going to cause casualties in the nation wherever they're hiding. And then when it gets there, they end up being swallowed up, is what I see happening here. Pastor Matt, I don't know if you see that.
No, that's it.
Which the dragon, notice how it flip-flops from serpent to dragon between 15 and 16. Just say that the tempter is now swelled up into the symbolic person in verse 3. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. And the dragon was happy and threw a party, right? He was enraged with the woman, and he went out to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Wow. So if I can't kill you, maybe I can go after your kids. Right? That's what Pastor Matt was saying earlier. But we find, who are the kids of the Israelites really? The product of the revival that Pastor Matt speaks of are Gentiles who now believe, and Israelites who are inhabitants of earth that now believe. And the devil says, if I can't take out the kids proper, I'm going to go after the people they've witnessed. What a chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good though.
I mean, how many times does the enemy have to lose? I think we need to use this as a weapon of our own warfare. Devil, you're not only a liar, but you're a multiple-time loser. You can't win at anything. You can't win, certainly, against the people of God. Take a hike, dude.